In this video I'm going to be installing the STIC Metering Block into my Keihin PWK 38mm air striker carb. Full disclosure, I received the STIC Metering Block from Harris Performance Engineering for review purposes. The STIC Metering Block replaces the standard Keihin block. The block is the part of the carburetor which sits down inside the bowl, which you can't normally see, and it houses the pilot jet, which you can see down in here, the main jet, and inside here is the needle jet, and then the needle sits in this orifice here. The benefits of the STIC metering block over the standard block are said to be improved fuel atomization, stronger signal and better fuel flow, which results in more power and better throttle response. So I've taken my Keihin carb off and I've cleaned it up, and the first step is to remove the float ball. So you just remove the 4 bolts on the bottom. Okay, once you've taken all 4 bolts off, the float ball should come off easily. The next step is to remove the float, and to do that you just push this pin out with something thin. And then put that aside carefully, and then you can lift out the float. And now you can see the standard Keihin block, and it's held in place with 2 bolts here, and they have a Torx 20 tamper-proof fitting. So you need a special bit to take those off, which was supplied with the STIC metering block. Then once you've removed the 2 bolts, the block just lifts out. Here you can see the standard Keihin block on the left and the STIC metering block on the right. And before you install the STIC metering block, you want to check the sealing surfaces are nice and clean and the gasket is in place. So the gasket goes all around here, and it has some detail around here, so you want to make sure that's pressed in properly and there's no dirt or grit on there. And also check down inside the carb where the block sits to make sure it's clean and there's no dirt or grit. And then take the STIC metering block and put it into position. Make sure it's seated correctly and that the bolt holes line up with the block. And then you can go ahead and install the bolts. So the new bolts come with thread lock pre-applied, so you can just use them as is. And then secure these bolts down. Then you can go ahead and reinstall the float. And you need to put the pin in as well. And now you're ready to put the float ball back on, but before you do, make sure the gasket is in place correctly, and also that it's clean and doesn't have any dirt on it. And once you've confirmed that's okay, and also the sealing surface on the carburetor housing is clean, there's no dirt, you can go ahead and reassemble it. And then secure it using the 4 bolts. Okay, so that's the installation of the metering block completed. The only thing you need to do is check your settings of the air screw, and then you'll need to adjust the idle as well once you've started the engine. So I'm going to set the air screw 1.5 turns out from full in, and then I might need to adjust it from there. And the idle position, I'm going to leave it how I had it set up before, and then make adjustments as necessary. So I've reinstalled the slide in the carb and fitted the cap back on. And before you refit it in the bike, it's always a good idea to check the slide is operating correctly. So using the throttle, you can check that it opens and closes smoothly, and also when you release the throttle it should make that noise which indicates it's closing fully. So that looks good, and I'm going to reinstall it. Once you've installed the carb, make sure it's lined up correctly. So on the top of the carb there's a little tang which should line out with a cutout on the air boot there. And once you've confirmed that, you can fully tighten the clamps on both the air boot and the intake. Also look around the carb, make sure it's not touching anything it shouldn't do, and that the breather hoses are hanging down correctly through the swing arm. And I removed the subframe bolts so I could flip the subframe up to get the carb in and out easily. So be sure to use some Loctite 243 and torque the subframe bolts to 35 Newton meters. Okay, so I've reconnected the fuel, and I'm going to put the choke on and test start it. So that feels fine. Obviously it needs to warm up to set the idle, but I'll give it a test ride and see how it goes. So tuning of the STIC Metering Block includes adjusting the pilot, air screw, needle, clip position, main jet, and in addition to those you can also change the needle jet. On the standard Keihin PWK carburetors you can't change the needle jets, so that's one other adjustment you have. So I've done some test runs with the STIC Metering Block on the road, and the initial jetting settings I've come up with are a pilot jet of 40. The needle, I'm staying with the JD red needle, but in the second clip, so a bit leaner than the standard setting. And the main jet, I've gone from a 172 up to a 182. I did discuss these settings with Harris Performance Engineering, and they mentioned that their testing, they mostly use a 30:1 fuel to oil ratio premix, and because I'm using 60:1, they think it might be beneficial to use a smaller needle jet. So they're going to send me one of those to test, and I'll fit it when I received it. But the initial settings I have seem to be working okay. So I'm going to do a few rides in the mountains and further dial in the jetting, and then I'll make a review video and detail the final settings. So if you're interested, please be sure to check that out.